Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for dialing in to this month's webinar presented by NASEO's Transportation Committee. It'll be covering Intrastate coordination for energy efficient transportation planning. And we have some good teams from Idaho and Colorado, and Alexa from the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation moderating. So we'll just get started in another couple minutes. Hi, everybody. We're right at the hour, so thanks for dialing into this month's NASEO Transportation Committee webinar. We'll get started in another minute or so, give people a chance to log on. We'll go through the presentations first, and then we have a good chunk of time at the end to go through any discussion or questions that you may have. So if you do have questions, you are welcome to type them to me in the questions feature of GoToWebinar. There's also a hand raising feature, so you can raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can ask it to the group. You're also welcome to email me at dtucker@naseo.org. So any of those three ways if you have questions. And in just another minute, we'll get started. Hi, everyone. We're a couple minutes past the hour, so let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for dialing into this installment of NASEO's Transportation Committee's webinar series for 2020. We have some good teams from Idaho and Colorado on the line prepared to talk with us about collaboration between state agencies on promoting transportation planning and energy efficiency. So I'm going to pass things over to Alexa Wojtek right now from the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, and she's going to kick things off for us. If you do have questions, you can type them in the question field of your GoToWebinar box. There's also a hand raising feature, or you can email me at dtucker@naseo.org. And we should have about 20 minutes or so, maybe more, at the end to go through questions. So without any further delays, I'll pass things to Alexa.
Thanks, Dylan. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Cool. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As Dylan said, my name is Alexa Wojtek. I am an Energy Programs Administrator in the Tennessee State Energy Office, which is housed within the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to kick us off today for our Transportation Committee conversation on intrastate collaboration for energy efficient transportation planning. In today's environment, we are seeing synergies unfold between varying departments within state governments, driven by common goals and a realization that more can be accomplished through collaboration or through the leveraging of each department's respective strengths. For state energy offices, many of us are grappling with the fact that the transportation sector is the largest source of emissions, and in many states, the largest end-use energy-consuming sector. Although our departments of transportation have historically led efforts involving the transportation sector, they may not have always conducted such efforts with an eye towards maximizing the energy efficiency of this sector or reducing transportation-related emissions or unnecessary energy waste. On the flip side, our departments of transportation have tools, expertise, funding, and experience in areas that may be relatively new territory for state energy offices, such as the use of transportation demand management strategies to reduce congestion, enhanced multimodal solutions, or complete streets development to reduce the number of single occupancy vehicles on the road, or to encourage mode switching to options such as public transit, use of bike lanes or walking trails, and the like. In other words, how can we leverage our different priorities? From a state energy office perspective, those priorities might be improving air quality through reduced vehicle emissions, increasing the energy efficiency of the transportation sector, or even strengthening the resilience of the transportation sector through diversification of fuel types, whereas the priorities of our departments of transportation may be focused on increased safety, reduced congestion, optimizing the transportation network, and providing a safe and reliable transportation system. So how can we leverage these different priorities such that they can complement one another to achieve a common goal? Each of our respective departments has contacts and stakeholders that we engage with on a regular basis. And so bringing these relationships to the table can further strengthen our efforts tied to energy efficient transportation planning. State energy offices, for example, have relationships with local power companies or utilities, and that can come in handy when planning. If, for example, we're building out an electric vehicle charging infrastructure network. Similarly, our departments of transportation, they regularly work with stakeholders such as metropolitan planning organizations, land use planners, and transit agencies, and can therefore be able to provide a unique perspective on how best to engage these types of stakeholders. So for purposes of today's conversation, we will hear from practitioners of intrastate collaboration, showcasing partnerships between state energy offices and state departments of transportation from both the states of Idaho and Colorado. And then, as Dylan mentioned, following their presentations, we will engage in an open discussion so we can further delve into these types of interstate relationships, the strategies behind them, any barriers associated with these types of initiatives, as well as best practices that other states can adopt in pursuing such efforts. So without further ado, I think we will start with Idaho. So we'll kick it off with our presentation from the Idaho folks.
Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Michael Brown at Idaho DEQ, and I'm joined with Katie Pagan from our Governor's Office of Energy and Mineral Resources. And I'm not sure if Matt Moore is on, but he's from our Idaho Transportation Department.
Yes, I'm on, Michael.
Okay, hi, Matt. So our involvement with the Volkswagen Settlement Program centered around two programs, our Vehicle Replacement Program and our EVSE program, Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment Program, which is run by Katie at the Office of Energy and Mineral Resources. The benefits of our collaboration began as we developed our BMP and we combined expertise that Matt had from his experience with CMAQ in developing our programs and coming together. And so real quick, what I'd like to do is just have Katie and Matt just introduce themselves and just describe their programs real quick. So maybe Katie, if I could just kick it to you real quick.
Sure. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay. This is Katie with the Office of Energy and Mineral Resources. Like Michael said, I oversee some of the work on the Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment Program. Our office collects applications for this program. It's a program that is designed to put fast charging stations along our interstate and highway corridors within the state. And so we ask that applicants turn in an application for a proposed location. We review it with an advisory group, which we will talk about in a little bit, and then we provide recommendations to the EQ, who will ultimately decide whether or not to pursue that location. And we do this all with the help and work of ITD and DEQ and our advisory group.
And Matt, real quick, if you could just describe what your role at ITD is and how you fit within the group.
Sure thing, Michael. Good morning, everybody. So my name is Matt Moore. I'm with the Governmental Affairs section in the Idaho Transportation Department, and work closely with Katie and Michael on the EVSC SE program, and then also coordinated the statewide submittals for the alternative fuel corridors designations. Again, working with the same partners as well as the Clean Cities Coalitions. And as you all know, fostered that idea of the 100-mile rural interstate distance for electric vehicles, which has led to a study that NREL is doing with USDOT.
And this is Michael again, and with our vehicle replacement program, similar to what Katie does with the EVSE program, we ask that applicants fill out applications. How the projects are awarded are primarily applicant driven, and so we put out the opportunity for folks to replace diesel vehicles with either new diesel, electric, or alternate fuels. And pretty much the applicants have driven the types of projects that move forward. So predominantly the vehicles go diesel to diesel. Some are going diesel to alternate fuel, and we've had quite a few diesel to electric projects as well. Part of the benefit of the collaboration with Matt was bringing in his experience with CMAQ and developing our application and our agreements as well. And just to help reach out to people and get the word spread through all of our offices. And that kind of takes us to the collaboration during the program implementation, having the interagency team and developing best practices and how to best formulate our applications and our agreements together helped immensely in terms of getting the program off and getting things started. Even down to the types of questions that we would ask on our application, how we're bringing people in. And then we also have our EV interest groups and EV advisory groups. So we continue those meetings, and the EV interest group, Katie, maybe you could help describe how our EV interest groups bring everybody together, including our utilities and other members of those groups.
Sure. So we've had a couple of groups kind of rise up out of interest in the work that Volkswagen Settlement has kind of created. Our largest investor-owned utility in Idaho, the Idaho Power, has a large portion of our state within their service territory. They have set up several meetings where they bring people together. Our Office of Energy and Mineral Resources, DEQ, and then several interest groups like the Sierra Club and Idaho Conservation League, as well as the PUC to discuss ideas that they have for electric vehicle pilots and programs and studies that they might be prepared for when the electric vehicle market kind of takes off in Idaho. And we've seen a similar interest group kind of pop up with the Idaho Conservation League, where they would like to talk about policies that they've seen in other states and discuss what would be beneficial in Idaho. And then with our advisory group, it's a similar setup where we have lots of the agencies working together, the Office of Energy and Mineral Resources, ITD, as well as our national lab that's in Idaho, Idaho National Lab, all of our electric utilities, as well as Boise State and Clean Cities Coalition, kind of discussing issues that have popped up with implementing Volkswagen settlement programs, but then discussing possible solutions to move forward, as well as keeping us on track to review applications and keep our programs moving forward.
And certainly the interest group that we participate in also helps, I guess, to introduce our vehicle replacement program to different sectors in terms of commercial diesel vehicles and helping to spread the word, and also branching out into even emergency response with partnerships with a couple of fire departments wanting, expressing interest in moving forward with all electric fire trucks. Well, at least we have one that's taken the leap to go to an all-electric fire engine. And that sort of continued partnership has led to our involvement, or more specifically Matt's involvement, with the alternative fuel corridor planning and development and the Core West. And so, Matt, maybe if you could speak to those 2 points.
Sure, Michael. I'd be happy to.
With those, yeah.
Yeah. So originally, the Katie's office developed a statewide energy plan summarizing, all types of energy sources available in Idaho, and that was a requirement of the previous governing administration in Idaho that also signed on to the Intermountain West governor's MOU to electrify interstates. And we started working closely with Katie's office to flesh out that information and get that submitted to the governor. And then with the MOU in place, we saw the basis for coordinating, fuel provision, service provision, that type of thing across our network. Developed an early submittal, one of the first submittals, and kind of underscored the work that we had to do with the VW settlement coming online. Of course, we have a financial resource to make that happen. Also worked with the electric power providers in Idaho to encourage them to reach out to potential clients and potential interested parties who would do the electric vehicle supply equipment installations. And then this most recent alternative fuel corridor submittal identified a lot of propane sources across Idaho that would allow us to designate a large majority of our interstates as alternative fuel corridors for propane with some limited electric vehicle corridors. We were challenged, of course, by the distance on the rural interstates where there are simply no interchanges and there's no electrical hardware in place, no transmission lines, no step-down facilities, that type of thing, which led to the discussion we had with FHWA on the 100-mile segment as opposed to the 50 miles. But all that was based on a partnership with DEQ, our department, Katie's agency, and the Clean Cities Coalition in Idaho.
So in terms of a skeletal outline of the partnerships that we've developed and how we're working with one another in moving forward and doing what we can to help reduce emissions associated with the diesel equipment that's on the road and promoting electric vehicles and electric vehicle transportation corridors. That is a quick snapshot of what we had for you.
Great, thank you, Michael.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great, and so we'll plan to hold questions until the end, and so I guess we will transition over to Colorado now.
All right, thanks, Dylan. Thank you, everybody. My name is Christian Willis. I'm the Director of Transportation Fuels and Technology at the Colorado Energy Office, and I'm joined by my colleague Sophie Schulman, who's the Chief of Innovative Mobility at the Colorado Department of Transportation. And so I think what you'll hear from us in terms of the way that we frame our comments today are that, you know, a lot of our early work together, our early partnerships developed more organically, really independent of any formal direction, and that this ultimately influenced partnerships that were created through administrative action or executive direction, and that these are really influenced by our early partnerships, and that our early initial collaborations came together primarily around grant programs that incentivized build out of alternative fuel vehicle fueling and charging infrastructure, as well as strategies to reduce the upfront cost of alternative fuel vehicles. And so I'll talk about two programs briefly, and then how those have influenced later efforts. But in 2013 and in 2014, we launched two programs. The first, called Charge Ahead Colorado. This is a grant program. It provides grants for community-based level 2 and DC fast charging stations around the state. And then a second program called Alt Fuels Colorado. This is a 4-year, $30 million program that is funded primarily through CMAQ. Through both of these programs, our key agency partners were Colorado Department of Transportation, or CDOT, as well as the Regional Air Quality Council, also called the RAC. They're an air quality quasi-governmental agency that works in the 7-county metro area. And these programs were really launched to address market barriers or policy priorities of the administration, and were really designed to leverage each agency's experience and relationships and resources. And so in terms of Charge Ahead Colorado, you know, early on, we recognized that the lack of charging infrastructure was going to be a major barrier. And so in 2013, we developed and launched this partnership, or this program rather, in partnership with the Regional Air Quality Council. It's a program that was and continues to be jointly administered by our two agencies. The RAC provides grants in the 7-county Denver metro area, and this is primarily because they receive funding through DRCOG, which is the Denver Regional Council of Governments. It's an MPO. So the funding is limited to that 7-county metro area, and then we provide grants across the rest of the state. We are a statewide agency, and the funding that we use doesn't have those sort of same geographical constraints. And so the main partnership is our two agencies. We administer a day-to-day program. We execute purchase orders with our grantees, but we also work very closely with the Department of Transportation, as well as the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. They sit on our technical advisory committee. They help us evaluate grant proposals. We do that 3 times a year, but then they also help us vet changes or improvements to the program that are based on the data that we collect from our grantees on a semi-annual basis, or changes in the market, really to help ensure that this program remains responsive to a changing market. I'd note that this program has actually been funded through a variety of sources since 2013. We initially started out with CO, providing grants as a part of our general fund, as well as the Colorado EV Fund, which comes from the EV registration paid by EV owners once a year. The Regional Air Quality Council, as I mentioned, uses CMAQ dollars, congestion mitigation, air quality, and then both agencies have worked together to deploy the VW funds that are dedicated toward EV supply infrastructure. That hasn't been too much of a challenge. I would note that, as everybody on the phone knows, I'm sure, that different funding sources have different constraints and different strings. So with the Regional Air Quality Council, for instance, because of CMAQ, every grantee has to go through a competitive bid process for their grants, whereas we don't require that, though we encourage it. So that there are some nuances in the ways that we each manage our own grants, but by and large, it's a cohesive program, and we present a very cohesive program publicly. This has been a really vital partnership. To date, we've made grants for more than 1,000 charging stations across the state. And so we anticipate this moving forward for a number of years. And again, a very important strategy in getting infrastructure built out all over the state. And I would say that that's really what led to the second program, Alt Fuels Colorado. This was released in 2014 to support the administration's interest in increasing use of CNG as a transportation fuel. And this program was designed to address both the supply of CNG by incentivizing construction of publicly available CNG stations, as well as demand by providing grants to offset the upfront cost of alternative fuel vehicles. And again, even more so than Charge Ahead Colorado, this program was really designed to leverage each agency's expertise and strengths. And so we'd been managing statewide infrastructure programs for a number of years. Regional Air Quality Council had been running commercial vehicle grant programs for more than 2 decades. And then CDOT, of course, has strong relationships with MPOs and local planning organizations, and then they also administer CMAQ funds for the state. And so by bringing those partners together, out of $30 million, 15 was dedicated to our organization to expand infrastructure, and then 15 was dedicated to the Regional Air Quality Council to incentivize purchase of commercial vehicles. I would note that like Charge Ahead Colorado, the program was conceived at the staff level, but it required extensive internal and external stakeholder engagement. So for instance, the program, before it was authorized, had to be blessed by the Statewide Transportation Advisory Committee. This is an advisory body to the Transportation Commission at CDOT. So they had to essentially bless it, and then the funding needed to be approved by the Transportation Commission. I'd note that the STAC can be, that's the Statewide Transportation Advisory Committee, can be a tough audience, but it helped that we had developed a good working relationship with CDOT staff. It helped pave the way for a good working relationship with the STAC, and ultimately resulted in the funding be approved by the Transportation Commission. Both CO and the Regional Air Quality Council had to execute intergovernmental agreements with CDOT. And so this really changed the nature of our relationship with CDOT. So we remained partners, but then CDOT became our funder and also conducted oversight into our activities. So it created a more nuanced relationship with CDOT, but one that was beneficial, I think, for all parties. One other thing I'd note about this program is that, unlike Charge Ahead Colorado, which has been pretty focused on EV charging infrastructure for the duration of its life, Alt Fuels Colorado really went through a lot of variations. So many probably remember that the price of petroleum fell pretty significantly in 2014. This led to less interest in CNG. When our new governor, Governor Polis, was elected last year, he came in with a big focus on zero-emission vehicles. And so ensuring that we have been responsive to changes in the market and to the new administration, it's required regular engagement with CDOT and other partners, creative problem solving as we look to shift our focus from CNG to electric, and then flexibility by each of the agencies. We've actually had to amend our IGA a couple of times to extend the time frame given the changes in the program. The result then is that we last year put out an RFA to electrify Colorado's major transportation corridors, resulting in a contract with ChargePoint to build stations at 34 sites across the state. I note too, with this program, we had to blend both CMAQ dollars as well as Volkswagen dollars. And that's been a little bit more challenging than Charge Ahead Colorado. Again, you have very different sets of requirements with CMAQ versus VW. The match requirements are different. Obviously, with federal dollars, you have things like Buy America and NEPA compliance and that sort of thing. So figuring out how to make those grant funds work together has been fairly challenging, although I think we've figured it out. And then I'll just sort of end my piece by saying, these relationships that formed organically at the staff level, as I said earlier, really influenced executive action. And so, for instance, in 2017, the previous governor, Governor Hickenlooper, issued an executive order on reducing climate emissions, and he directed our office to work with our agency partners, including CDOT, CDPHE, and the Regional Air Quality Council to develop a statewide EV plan. And then I also note that when Colorado was required to develop the VW BMP, while our environmental agency was designated as the lead, all four agencies came together to develop that plan. And again, really leveraging experience, expertise, existing programs and relationships in the market to develop that program, and ensuring that all funds are allocated through these programs that have been developed over years and years, and through partnerships that have been developed over that same time period. And so the programs that I discussed, Charge Ahead Colorado, Alt Fuels Colorado, are the vehicles by which we're deploying those VW funds, and it's allowed us to get that funding out very quickly. And so with that, I'll transition over to Sophie with Colorado Department of Transportation.
Thanks, Christian. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. So as Christian mentioned, I'm Sophie Schulman. I lead the Office of Innovative Mobility at CDOT, which has a number of priorities that touch on clean transportation, including transit, electric vehicles, and new mobility technologies. So a pretty broad swath of opportunities to really impact emissions from the transportation sector. And I'm going to pick up where Christian left off, which is really at the beginning of Governor Polis's administration here in Colorado. And as Christian mentioned, the governor is very enthusiastic about the future for electric vehicles in Colorado, and really was motivated in one of his first executive actions to issue an executive order as a follow-on to the one that Governor Hickenlooper had issued in 2017 that really cemented a goal that had already been sort of floating around in the EV plan, which was for 940,000 light-duty electric vehicles on the road by 2030, which is an aggressive goal, and really laid out a number of actions that agencies, including CDOT, CEO, our Public Health and Environment Agency, and others really needed to take in order to help meet that goal. And I think primary among those was adoption of the zero emission vehicle standard, which folks are probably familiar with, but if not, it's a standard set up along based on California's regulation on automakers to sell a certain percentage of zero emission vehicles within the state. So, obviously this has been really successful for California and a number of other states that have adopted it, most of which are in the Northeast. And we've really seen a lot of data that shows that adopting a ZEV standard leads to more model variability and higher EV sales, especially in conjunction with other incentives that are focused on consumers, like a tax credit. And Colorado has one of the most generous tax incentives in the country. It was $5,000 last year and is now $4,000. But we really think that we've put in place a number of the other pieces, and that zero emission vehicle standard was really the key piece that we were missing to really get as many vehicles here in Colorado as possible. And one of the reasons that was really important, I think many of the folks on this call, everybody has their own diverse elements of their state. Colorado has a lot of mountains and cold weather, and so making sure that we have all-wheel drive vehicles as soon as they're available, making sure that we have as many long-range EVs as possible is really critical for us to be able to sell this option to Coloradans. And pickup trucks are very popular here. So as we all know, many of those options are still maybe a year or two away, but we really wanted to make sure that we had, as many tools in our toolbox as possible to convince manufacturers to sell those vehicles here. One thing that also happened, as Governor Polis came in, is he brought in a new leadership team, which, the picture you see on your screen here is actually Will Tor, who's the head of the Colorado Energy Office, plugging in a CDOT Chevy Bolt. But, he's a head of the Energy Office that has a background in transportation, and Shoshana Liu, who's the executive director of CDOT, is a transportation expert who has a background in fuel efficiency and environmental policy. And I think that's been really, really helpful in having leadership that speaks the same language, that understands the technical aspects of both sides of this. And it's really been instrumental, especially in the adoption of the ZEV standard. So one of the things that Colorado did, which is pretty unique, we were one of the first states to start thinking about this in a very long time. And so we actually spent a significant period leading up to the official rulemaking process, discussing with automakers an alternative voluntary approach, which really was targeted at, are there commitments we can get from auto companies that would get us the same or better results as a regulation, which one of the issues with the regulation is that there's a lag time associated with it. And so we certainly approached this with the hope that if we were able to come up with a voluntary agreement, that we might be able to get something in place sooner, which would get more vehicles in Colorado sooner. Ultimately, we ended up just going forward with the formal rulemaking process. It was too complicated to get a number of different automakers to sign on to a voluntary approach. It was very difficult to negotiate across 10 to 20 different companies and get consensus on that. But what it did lead to is one of the first opportunities where the automakers actually supported a zero emission vehicle rulemaking in the country, because we were able to negotiate a compromise that they were able to support, which included early action credits, meaning that they'll be able to get, if manufacturers opt in, they are able to get credits early in Colorado. So we're hoping that means that as soon as this year, they'll be bringing more vehicles to Colorado, which we're very excited about and really excited to collaborate. And I think having this opportunity with the companies and that CEO, CDPHE, which is our Public Health and Environment Agency, and CDOT all work together on this, that all of us working with the companies can have a more collaborative effort going forward, especially in areas like marketing and targeting specific vehicles. We unfortunately had to postpone our auto show here in Denver, but we were working very closely with the manufacturers and our dealer association to get some of the new vehicles that are coming out in model year 21 that we're really excited about. So we're hopeful that when that gets rescheduled, we'll be able to really show how that collaboration can work going forward. So, we were very successful in this process over the summer of adopting the zero emission vehicle standard. And I think that really helped build on what Christian was talking about, of this sort of organic staff level coordination that was happening for many years to create many of the really great programs that frankly created the momentum in Colorado to really have this executive action. And now we have sort of a really great relationship at the leadership level as well. And one of the things that happened sort of simultaneous to the ZEV adoption was a really ambitious climate agenda adopted by our state legislature, which set emissions reduction targets in all sectors, but including transportation. And that really has set a very high bar for Colorado and for all of the state agencies to work together to determine how we're going to meet those goals, through really a suite of different transportation tools. And so I mentioned at the beginning that I lead the Office of Innovative Mobility at CDOT, which is a new office that was created by Executive Director Lou. And it, again, it's really focused on this broader set of tools that we have, a very important one being transit, new technologies, electrification, all working together to really reduce emissions across the transportation sector. And the Colorado Energy Office has also brought on an additional staff member who can help with the intersection of climate and transportation, especially issues like planning and land use, which are obviously very complex. And I think, a new area for the Colorado Energy Office to be delving into, and frankly, an area that CDOT is excited to work more on, but hasn't historically gotten involved in. Christian mentioned some of the stakeholders that we have to deal with at CDOT, including the Statewide Transportation Advisory Committee and the Transportation Commission, which approved CDOT budget. And I think having this new office within CDOT of innovative mobility has given us the opportunity to reprioritize some resources that may have gone elsewhere within the department, and really explain to the Transportation Commission and to the stack how important transportation is to meeting those emissions goals. And so I've been able to get new funding for electrification to help with the charging programs that the Colorado Energy Office has been working on for a long time, transportation demand management, and really figure out how all of those tools work together and secure additional resources, which we're all really excited about and hope we can continue in the future here in Colorado. So I just want to close with, thanking Christian for really welcoming me to Colorado about a year ago. And I think we've really built a great, built on the great relationship that already existed between the state agencies and helped to really create what I think feels like one team. We all know we have really aggressive goals set by our governor. We have a really important opportunity with pretty great momentum in Colorado, but also a high bar to reach. And as we get more resources, both financial and staff resources, we really see those as contributing to the same team that's trying to achieve these goals. So thanks for having me on the webinar today.
Thank you to the folks from Idaho and Colorado for those insightful comments. Do we have any questions that have come in yet, Dylan? If not, I can go ahead and kick us off with a question for our Q&A session.
Nothing has come in yet if you want to kick things off.
Okay, cool. And just a reminder for folks, if you have any questions, you can enter those into the chat box. Are they able to also speak up as well, Dylan, if they want to ask the question verbally, or should they just enter into the chat box?
There is a hand raising feature, so you can indicate to me that you want to speak, and then I can unmute you.
Cool. So yeah, I'll go ahead and get us kicked off with a question. So I think that what you guys touched on in terms of relationships that form organically at the staff level, I really like that idea, and then kind of turning into something more robust or defined, whether or not it needs to be something more defined by administrative action or not, just kind of how those processes can unfold and result in different collaborative efforts. I'll mention that in Tennessee, something that we've done for the last few years, our Department of Environment and Conservation and our Department of Transportation, we co-host a forum, an annual forum and award ceremony on sustainable transportation, where we try and convene our respective stakeholders on these sorts of topics. But mostly we convene that forum to try and foster brainstorming on solutions or new pathways where we could be collaborating moving forward. So my question for Idaho and Colorado is, and I guess for any other states on the phone too, if you want to chime in, as we think of ways to support energy efficiency, not just at the vehicle level, but at the fleet level or at the system-wide level, thinking about, entire cities, the transportation networks within cities, or even the networks from our interstate systems and corridors. Do you envision new areas of opportunity where your departments could collaborate beyond, what you're already doing, and kind of where could that go? Where could you see that going? And then on top of it, to pile on top of this, I know we're talking about specifically collaborations between state energy offices and DOTs, but what about other agencies that we can bring into the mix to leverage their strengths? Even if we're still talking about transportation, how could our departments of economic and community development or departments of agriculture, how could they potentially be worked into this to develop new solutions or opportunities?
Well, I'll chime in from Idaho.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay. From my perspective, administering the vehicle replacement program, we've reached out to different. This is more like smaller municipalities in terms of, soliciting applications for, larger fleets and seeing what sort of applications that we can solicit in terms of. But again, that's more at the vehicle replacement level. In terms of interacting with agencies of economic development, participate some with the small business development center and trying to, again, but it's more at the application level, trying to get the word out and get more municipalities or more small businesses to participate. Don't have any specific plans with agencies for development or partnerships, but maybe Katie, you had something to contribute there.
Yeah, I was just going to comment. Our office, as well as Idaho Transportation Department, are part of a larger regional group called RevWest, and we have talked more recently about ways of kind of like what Michael was saying, getting the word out that we do have corridors that are being electrified, and several states have started reaching out to their departments of of tourism. So whether that's in your commerce department or if it's a standalone agency itself, but talking to them about how they can help get the word out that they have corridors that are electrified, whether that's a scenic byway or a destination location that people might want to drive to with their electric vehicles. We're also seeing that more and more interest in like national parks, because the RevWest states, which include most of the Intermountain West states that hug the Rocky Mountains, have a lot of national parks and national forests. And so we're seeing a lot of interest in electrifying gateway cities along those areas so that we can encourage more people to kind of travel to those locations from wherever they are. So we're seeing a lot of potential movement towards that.
This is Christian from Colorado. I think one group of stakeholders that hasn't been mentioned is local governments. We certainly see that while there's a lot that we can do at the state level, much of what needs to be done is going to happen at the local level. And so this year we've started partnering with a number of local communities to provide grants to help them develop EV readiness plans. So they're starting to think about what they can do as a local government to both support and benefit from adoption of electric vehicles in their communities. And so we've really pushed for developing regional visions for electrification involving key partners like local utilities, counties, local governments, and then stakeholders such as environmental groups or car dealerships or other type of stakeholder that could positively support electrification of the market, and ensuring that they're prepared and that they identify that kind of the right roles and responsibilities in their community. So we see that as really vital. There's a lot that we can do at the state level, but a lot of this needs to happen at the local level.
That's great. And I don't see any questions. Oh,
we have one. June from Hawaii has her hand raised. So I just unmuted you, June. You should be able to talk.
Hi, thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, I have two questions, if I may. The first one I'll direct for Christian. We are currently also doing a very similar thing where we're commingling VW funds with other federal funds, such as EPA DERA funds and Lono grant. And I guess we've kind of looked at it as it's been easiest to do MOUs with the other departments, our Department of Health, as well as our Department of Transportation. And VW has, kind of less restrictions on it than the other federal funding. So we've been kind of transferring those funds to them to distribute it to others. And I was just wondering if you guys kind of did something similar, or if you have any lessons learned from you distributing those funds and grant programs. We're kind of just on the early stages of that, so I'd love any insight you have.
So is the question more about the relationship between the state agencies or about commingling of funds?
I guess about, the relationship between the agencies and then also actually distributing those funds, whether it be to private entities replacing vehicles or to like Department of Transportation projects to support those?
So I can start, and Sophie, if you feel like jumping in, we do. So each of the agencies, because the lead agency is our environmental agency, CDPHE, each of our agencies has an intergovernmental agreement, which is, essentially a contract between departments. As I mentioned in my comments, each of our agencies has existing programs that we're then able to deploy funding through. All the programs do competitive solicitations. So the two that I mentioned, we do, in the case of Charge Ahead, we do 3 rounds a year. In the case of alt fuels, the vehicles, they usually do about 2 rounds a year. And then Department of Transportation has what they call the Consolidated Call for Capital Projects, where they do an annual funding round for transit agencies. Sophie, I don't know if you have anything to add about, I know that there are a number of different funding sources related to transit, and I'm not really that familiar with those.
Yeah, I mean, I think you laid it out well. We obviously have sort of stuck with where there was an existing relationship, or an existing program that made sense. So the consolidated call includes, a number of things like, FTA funds that CDOT administers directly to our local transit agencies. So a number of those, a number of different programs that could fund the same activities, and we do distribute the Volkswagen settlement funds for bus electrification along with that. I don't recall if we have commingled low-no funds with Volkswagen. I think because those are, allocated through different means. I don't know if we've done it quite, that specifically, but certainly there are folks that apply for both the low-no program and apply for Volkswagen settlement funds through CDOT, and certainly, it's something that we think about as we're trying to balance out where the funds are going.
Thank you very much. Super helpful. And then my second question is for, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, this is Michael from Idaho, and what we've done is we have our DERA program and we have our Volkswagen settlement program, and while we used to focus our DERA funds mostly on retrofits, what we found is that our participants are reluctant, even after they've indicated a willingness to participate. When the rubber meets the road, they really just kind of back out and stop returning phone calls. Because they really just don't want to deal with retrofits. But what they have indicated is that they're very interested in vehicle replacement. So we have a combined solicitation where our applications, because they have different requirements and DERA requirements are a little bit more involved, we have questions within our application that sort of get to if they meet the DERA requirements. And where vehicles are eligible under DERA, we'll fund through DERA, and where they meet the requirements. And where they don't, and we can fund it through VW, then we will fund it through VW. And we do the rebates through the trust, through their normal processes, and then we use the EPA's participant support cost agreements to fund the rebates through DERA. But it's all part of one application process, but it does make it somewhat cumbersome in separating the two.
Right. So the program is one program, one application, but you have 2 different funding streams that you award people through.
Correct.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So when it's VW, we have our Volkswagen rebate agreement. And when it's through DERA, we have participant support cost agreement.
Okay, thank you very much. Really helpful.
Sure.
Okay, and then if I can ask just one more question for Idaho regarding the alt fuel corridors that you guys have. We, again, the Energy Office put in the designation application to get the corridors on 3 of our islands. And now we're kind of in the process. We got the designation, but are trying to get the signage up and then add more chargers on our corridor with our VW funds. So that again is a bit of a coordination between our Department of Transportation and our office with the funding. And I guess that, again, just kind of lessons learned for the corridors, specifically for like that signage, because that's typically a different like funding source you're using for that. And I guess just kind of wondering how you guys maybe manage that, or if you kind of put it all together under a corridor, a larger corridor project.
This is Matt Moore at ITD. I guess my insight would be we don't have any signs up at this point.
Okay.
And pending the designations of this last submittal, we would put up signs, at least on the interstates where there were propane corridors. There's a couple of small EV corridors which may be signed as well. And we had our traffic and signs group put together a cost for that, and that was just be built into our statewide transportation improvement program going forward as a project. And then once that was approved and funded, we would use highway monies to put those signs up.
This is Katie in the Energy Office in Idaho, and we've also kind of run into a bit of an issue of trying to find locations to place some of our EV stations, in the sense that we have several swaths of the interstate and highway corridor where it just wouldn't be safe or feasible to put a station because there isn't really anything there. And so what we're doing right now with ITD is working with Federal Highway Administration and NREL to come up with a study of whether or not to kind of expand this idea of an EV corridor being ready when there's a station every 50 miles. So there'd be urban and rural designations if we kind of had our way. So there could possibly be 100 miles in between some of the rural designated corridors between stations, which would help some of the states kind of make that EV ready status, because we just don't have certain locations that we could put a station in.
Thank you, that's helpful. Matt, did your office, ITD, were they the ones that put in the corridor application?
Yes, in partnership with Katie's office and the Clean Cities Coalitions in Idaho.
I see, okay. Thank you very much, really helpful. I appreciate all your time.
Thanks, June. I don't see any other questions coming in. There's a few minutes left, Alexa, if you have anything else, or?
Yeah, I can ask another quick question. So another thing that I was interested in is how your agencies are dealing with data sharing between the departments to support planning, access to different types of data that can be leveraged, whether the Department of Transportation has certain types of data that could then inform program design or funding decisions within the State Energy Office or vice versa. So I'm curious if you guys could just speak a little bit to the ways in which you're dealing with data sharing.
Yeah, this is Sophie from Colorado, and this is a little bit of a work in progress, so we'll let you know how it turns out. But one of the things that I alluded to is some of the climate goals that we have in the state, and one of the processes that the Energy Office is taking the lead on is putting together a greenhouse gas roadmap. And one of the key parts of that is modeling certain mitigation strategies as well as sort of the current state of things. And, where we've found it really useful, that's a much larger collaborative effort than just our two agencies. It's agriculture, it's natural resources, it's, really every sector of the economy and the state agency that's associated with that. But, we're utilizing tools like our statewide travel model that CDOT maintains to really try to have the best transportation data possible to inform, fuel mixes and things like that. So, I think that's a really great opportunity to see what tools we can get from data sharing across many different agencies. And again, it's a work in progress, so we'll certainly have to share lessons learned once it's done.
This is Matt again in Idaho. I guess in terms of data sharing, we just have great partnerships with our Energy, Minerals, and Resources Office and DEQ and Clean Cities, and they've all been very supportive, and we kind of just broke up the analysis and chased the data down that we needed and combined it all in the application package.
Sounds good. Well, we're just about at the hour and I don't see any more questions coming in. So I just want to take a minute to thank all the presenters for taking the time out to share your experience and your best practices with us. And thanks to Alexa for moderating the conversation. If any other questions come up, my email is on the screen. You can feel free to send me a quick note. I can put you in touch with the speakers or try to get you an answer a different way. So thanks so much, everybody, for calling in. It was a productive discussion. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.